Hi everyone. Today we're going to learn field sketching birds with me, Poo Wright-Pulliam. This is part one. We're doing this for Golden Eagle Audubon Society in Boise. This is a COVID-19 stay-at-home production done by me. So anyway, everybody got that? Look at that cute little chickadee that I drew the other day for this. Okay, today a little about me. This is some of my artwork here. This is the owls that I did for, get this straight here, got to do my arms backwards. I did those for Intermountain Bird Observatory in Boise. I get to go hang out with all the wonderful staff up there and paint and draw birds while I'm up there. And if you're in Boise, near the Boise State campus, you can go see this enlarged along with two other sets of songbirds and of raptors on their windows. So it's really exciting for me to have my work on their windows there. They're in great big huge sizes like this. Each head is about like this on their windows. It's really fun to see. So a little bit about me and my artwork. Here's a piece, another one from IBO, one of my paintings of an immature peregrine falcon that I did. And these take me a number of hours to do. But what we're going to learn is to do quick sketches, 30 seconds to maybe 3-minute sketches, maybe a little bit longer. It all depends on how long the bird stays around. But I started drawing, well, I don't even remember how long ago. I have been drawing ever since I can remember, and in the 2nd grade, I decided that I was going to become a famous artist. And so I started saving my artwork. This is my little black briefcase. Many of you have heard about my little black briefcase, and here it is. It's all full of my artwork from 2nd grade school, mostly 2nd grade stuff. So I've been drawing all of my life. I've been painting all of my life, and I feel like it came full circle when I started doing the birds as well. I used to just do a lot of scenics, things like that. But then I started teaching myself watercolor and I started doing birds. I started sketching them originally in about 1997, I think, back in the last century. And I started sketching what was at my window. I had a rare bird come and land at my window that I didn't know what it was. And so I thought I would sketch it so I could try and figure out what it was, because it wasn't in any of the books that I had. Nonetheless, it became a very rare bird. It was very exciting to have, and it was called a Siberian accenter. And many people came to see it. So I got to meet a lot of nice birders, a lot of you guys that I'm speaking to here, and many of you came to see it. We figure about 1,200 people came to see that bird in the neighborhood just down from my house. It came to my house first and then spent the next 3 months down in a neighborhood here in the Wood River Valley between Ketchum and Haley. So anyway, I love drawing, I love painting, and now that I'm retired, I get to do it all the time. I also started teaching these classes for Elder Hostel, which is now called Rhodes Scholar. I started teaching these classes back in the late 1900s as well. And this is my flip chart. I have taken a long time to learn how to do anything else besides. There were no computers then, at least I didn't know how to work one, back when I started teaching this class. So I did my flip chart here. And the nice thing about this is that it can go outside or it can go inside, and it's designed to hang just about anywhere. So my husband designed it for me, and I've stuck with this just because it's really a lot easier. I just enjoy doing it this way, and it's what I've done for years. So this is what you're going to get from me, is my cool flip chart. So I'm going to start out here, just a little bit of scientific stuff, because you need to know how to identify the birds. And so I do this one real fast so that you can learn about the phylum, the class, the order, the family, the genus, and the species. And I teach this because in the bird books, you will see the bird's name in the first part of it in italics at the bottom under the common name. You'll see it in italics, And the first part of the name is capitalized always. The second part is not capitalized. But that's the actual name all around the world for that bird. But we might call it something different here in Idaho than we call it up in Canada or over in Europe, but we might be talking about the same bird. So I like to teach this part of it just so you know. Mostly what you're going to see is this and this, actually, genus and species. So the way it kind of works, the phylum, class, order, family, genus, species is, if you think about it this way, the nation, the state, the county, the city, the district, and the precinct. So here we have the first one is Chordata in the phylum Chordata, which would be like the USA. Then we would have, this means it has a spinal cord, so even us, we have spinal cords, so we're in the Chordata as well as the birds. Then we already cut it down to the class, which would be Aves, that means they have feathers, would be like the state being Idaho. Then in the order, passeriforms are perching birds. So that would be like the county, as in Blaine County here where I am, or Ada County where a lot of you are. Then we go down to family, which would be like the city. Turdidae in the family means the upper mandible is notched, and that would be like the city of Ketchum. In genus, it would be like the district. We're going to work it all the way down here to Turdus, which means the third, fourth, and fifth primary feathers are shorter. That would be like District 2. And then the species would be like the precinct. Migratorius would be like Precinct 1. So the bird that we've gone all the way from things with spinal cords all the way down here to Turdus migratorius, which is our robin, our American robin. So there you go. That gives you a quick one on that. Look in your books and you'll see what I'm talking about. But for instance, if I was talking about a camp robber, here, a lot of times we think camp robbers are magpies. But in Canada, they might be talking about, now called the Canada jay, which was the gray jay. And they call their camp robbers the gray jay. So we would be talking about, if we were on the phone, talking about two completely different birds. And being very confused because one is gray and white and the other one was black and white. So if we went to this section in our book, the genus and the species, we would then know that we're talking about two different birds and we can get an alignment and figure out which bird we're actually talking about. So, enough of that. The one thing that birds have, of course, is feathers. They're the only animal on Earth that has feathers. This is how it's designed. We have the rachis down the middle, and we have the barbs on the sides. And the barbules are hooked like this, and on the other side they're like this. So this side wraps around this barbule coming off this one, and this one is straight. So it comes down like this, and they zip, like you can zip them back and forth together. If you find a feather, you can pull it apart and run your fingers along it and zip it back together. And that's what birds are doing when they're preening. This is a feather sheath, and this is natal down up here. So this is how the feather comes out originally from the skin. So that is basically how feathers are designed. And again, if you find a feather, zip it apart and back together. It's kind of fun to see. You can also tell feathers where they are on the bird's body, which we'll get into a little bit later. And I always love it when some of the kids that I've taught will bring me a feather, and then we go through and try and figure out what part of the body that feather is from, whether it's from the wing or the body or the tail, and right or left. It's always a nice challenge to try and do that. So in flight, we have the downstroke muscles and the upstroke muscles. The supracoracoideus is the upstroke muscle, which is this one right here. And the pectoralis major is like our pectoralis majors, but what's unusual about birds is the supracoracoideus wraps up and over and connects back here. So when we bring our arms down as humans, we contract this muscle in the front, which is the pectoralis major from our humerus here. But when we bring it back up, this muscle back here contracts, back here. So the birds on their supracoracoideus, it runs across and over the back. So when they constrict this other muscle on their chest, it brings their wing up. So that's one thing that birds do that nobody else does. So that's kind of cool. If you look at your Christmas turkey, you'll see that it has a keel, and that's what this is right here, that both of these muscles are attached to. So on the wing, here's like my arm here. See my arm? We have here the humerus. We have this part of the arm here. We have the allula, which is kind of like our thumb. And then the fingers down here are joined where the primaries are attached. So this is the primaries. This is the secondaries. This is a drawing of a mallard with some white, black, blue, black, and there's a little bit of white here that you can see. They also have this patagial membrane where it stretches across here like this. And this is what keeps their wings open, the patagial membrane. Like on a red-tailed hawk, when we talk about the patagial mark, that's where that little triangle is that's only on red-tailed hawks. That is a good way to identify them in the area. And when they're in the air, is to just look right here and see that. When they're in flight, they have four things that happens. They have gravity, which is constant and downward. They have drag, which is the wind resistance. They have lift, where the air is going faster over the top than it is under the bottom. And they have thrust, and that's when the wing is in action. So when the wings are flying, it's doing all of those things. And if you've ever put your hand out the car window and gone like this in the wind, that's basically what a wing is doing as well. The air rushing underneath, the air rushing on top, and it's all creating flight. When we're looking for birds, we're going to be looking for habitat. We're going to look, for instance, for edge effect, which is really cool. There's a place here called Silver Creek Preserve, and I'm sure you might have some over there in Boise as well, where we have, on one side you look at the creek that runs through, Silver Creek Preserve runs through, and it has a bog area, and then you turn around the other way, and up the hill is all sagebrush habitat. So we have two different habitats there called edge effect again, and there'll be different birds in each one. So it's always a good place to bird if you can find some edge effect and go there, like a forest up against a meadow where you might find a great gray owl even. So we're also going to look at body shape. We're going to look at the head, tail length, wings. We're going to be looking at all of those features, seeing how big the beak might be or how long the tail is compared to the body. We'll look for body marks, the color, the wing bars, the facial marks. The beak is very important. It'll tell you a lot about the bird. The beak alone will tell you a lot about what kind of bird it is and what family it might be in. We look at the size, the shape, and the color. So we have straight beaks that might be flycatchers, shrikes, waxwings. I shriek for shrikes. Yes, I do. Conical beak would be finches, sparrows, and grosbeaks, which many of these are the ones that we'll see at our feeders, where they have that conical beak that they eat seeds with. We have curved beaks, which might be curlews, that big long beak of curlews that they dip into the mud to pull little crustaceans and things like that out, all the different ones with curved beaks. And then of course we have the hooked beaks that the raptors would use for ripping and tearing. So very important what their beak looks like and what they might be doing with their beak as to how they feed themselves. Also very important, the first thing you want to do is look at the bird's beak when you see a bird, and then you want to try and get in your mind's eye what all of these field marks are. And there's lots of field marks here, as you can see, or there may be none. That might be what tells you what bird it is, if there's nothing compared to all of these stripes. So it's all very important. So here we have the crown, which runs along the top, the crown stripe, which is right in between, the eyebrow, this is the nape. So in a lot of the books, if you wonder about their names, it took me a while to figure this one out. So the nape is right here. The crown is here, or the cap, if the, like a Wilson's warbler would have a cap right here. The goldfinch would have a front section that's colored. So those can all be different things that tell you where they are. And on the front, when it's right here, a lot of the birds are called golden fronted or whatever. That means they're talking about this color right here. I always wondered, I thought it would be the chest, but it's not. It's right here on the forehead, golden fronted or whichever the bird is named after. Fronted always means right here. We also have the eye stripe going directly through the eye. We have the moustachial stripe, which is coming off the corner of the mouth or the beak. And then we have the malar stripe, which comes off, it's kind of like right here, right along here. And then the chin, of course, underneath the chin could be a different color. All these can be different colors. They can be the same colors. And again, they're there or they're not there. Some will just have an eye stripe. Some will have just a crown stripe. Some will have just a moustachial stripe. And the beak can be black. It can be bone colored. It can be gray. It can be yellow or pink. So all of that is stuff that you need to pay attention to. On the body, we have, again, the forehead. We have the back. We have the wing bar or two wing bars, and these are the edges of the upper coverts and the secondary coverts where the wing bar usually is. Sometimes it could be a big patch right there, though. We have the rump, which can be a different color. This can be a different color. The tail can be striped or barred. It can have white outer tail feathers, or just this tip might be different, the very tip. The waxwings, both waxwings, Bohemian and cedar waxwings, have a yellow tail tip. And in the United States, they're the only bird with a yellow tail tip. So if you see something in flight and you can tell that the tail tip is yellow, you know immediately that you have one of two birds. You've narrowed it down that fast. So undertail coverts can also be a different color. The belly can be a different color. The flanks here can be different colors, and the chest can be different. And there can be bars across the chest. There can be stripes across the chest. There can be all kinds of different things going on every part of the bird. Lots of sparrows have a striped back, lots of different colors under the chin, necklaces, all kinds of fun things can be going on here. So just to give you an idea, there's a lot to look at when you first look at a bird. And I also call it triple committing. So when you look at a bird, you first see a bird with your eyes. That's the first commit. And then when you put your binoculars up, you get a much better view, and that's the second commit. The first time I looked at American robins in a pair of binoculars, I thought I knew them well. I'd grown up with them in Boise. But the first time I looked at an American robin through binoculars, it had black and white stripes under here, and it had this beautiful partial eye ring, and I thought, oh my goodness, what have I found? This is not a robin. What can this be? And then I went to the bird books, and sure enough, it was an American robin. I just hadn't seen all those really tight, nice details that you get with binoculars. So that's the second commit. And the third commit, the way I feel about it, is that when you put it down onto paper, you look at that bird really hard and you commit all of these field marks that you see here, or non-field marks. You look at them and then you put them on paper, and it helps you remember those field marks even better. So that's the triple commit, is that putting it on paper. And even for people who claim that they can't draw a stick figure, because I know there's probably a lot of you out there saying that, I feel like the way that I'm going to teach you is not so much about these kind of drawings here, which you may or may not grow to, but they're the types of drawings that are going to give you all of these field marks in the proper places that you'll then going to be able to identify that bird once you go to a bird book. So it's better if you can get the bird onto paper and then go to the bird book later, because once you start looking through a bird book, you start seeing all of these different features, and you start saying to yourself, oh gosh, did it have that? Oh, I don't remember if it had that. Oh, I'm not sure what all it had now because I've looked at so many pictures I'm confused. So that's the bonus of putting it down onto paper and getting those field marks in the right place. That's what I'm going to teach you about in the second part of this class. Another thing that's really going to help us ID the bird is the shape of the wings and how they fly. So there's broad and round wings. Some of the raptors have that. There's long and flat ones for the swallows and things like that. Short and round for bursts of flight, which the grouse, if you've ever been out in the grouse, all of a sudden jump up and go flying and just scare you to death. That would be these wings. And then we have the pointed and long ones like the albatross and some of the birds that are out at sea. But the wings will tell you a lot about the bird as well. And also how far it migrates by how long the primary feathers are. Again, the primaries are these coming off like our fingers. That's the primaries, the secondaries again. The tail, you can identify off the tail. Many of you have battled with identifying the Cooper's hawk versus the sharp-shinned hawk. And the Coopers would have a rounded tail, and the sharp-shinned would have the squarer tail. So that little tiny thing can still tell you what you're looking at. We have a slightly forked, like in the pine siskin. If you look at them up close at your feeders with that little tiny conical bill, you'll see that they have a forked tail. On the graduated tail, that could be like the mourning dove or some of the cuckoos. And then we have the forked tail, like barn swallow. And then a pointed long tail. This one, of course, would be, that I've drawn here, is for the pheasant. So long and decorative and kind of flutters in the wind. If you've been to Costa Rica and you've seen the resplendent quetzal, ooh, boy, that's a long tail there. Amazing. So all of these will help you identify birds as well. And I was told by one of my college professors, the reason I'm teaching you this is because of what my college professor told me. He said, you need to know what's underneath to be able to draw what's on top. And at the time we were learning to draw the human form, and I found that it's exactly like that when you're drawing birds as well. You need to know what's underneath to be able to draw what's on top. You need to know how everything works and help you draw birds better and understand where those field marks sit. Okay, lastly here, we have the feet. Now, everybody gets confused on the feet because this is actually right here, right here, right here, right here. Is like the bottom of our foot. This is the toes. We all get that part, that this is the toes. But this is like the bottom of the foot. So they're actually standing on their tippy toes. And many of us don't quite understand that. So what goes here goes up that we see below the belly, and then it goes back into the body, and we don't always see the part that comes up like this and then back into the body unless they're standing up really straight. So a lot of us get confused on what part of the body this is. But this is actually the bottom of the foot, like our heel, down, and then the toes. The heel, down, and the toes, and the heel, down, and the toes. Heel, down, and the toes. So standing on their tippy toes, that's what they're doing. Otherwise, their body structure, their skeletal structure, is almost identical to what we are, if you look at it. There are places you can go. One place I really like to go is All About Birds. That's www.allaboutbirds.org. And you can find just about any information about all of the different species on there. And you can hear their song, you can learn about how many eggs they lay, what their nest is like. It's put on by Cornell, and it's a wonderful place to go for information. If you see a bird outside and you don't know what it is, you can usually go to allaboutbirds.org. Or there's lots of apps that you can put on your phone. I have the iBird app on my phone, I have the Sibley app on my phone, I have Audubon app on my phone. You can do so many different things on the phones these days that you hardly even have to take your books out into the field. But I have to admit that I have just about every field guide that there is, because when I first started birding, I would look through every single one. I would look up the same bird in every single one so I could get all the little bits of information out of all those parts on the bird. And just thumbing through the book, that's how I started. I was given a challenge in 1995, and the challenge was to identify 100 birds. And so my friend gave me a bird book. It was the Golden Guide, which doesn't have all of the birds because they've split so many out nowadays. It's an older book. But she gave me the Golden Guide, and I went off to Alaska, and my husband and I used to do commercial fishing up in Alaska in Igigik Bay. And gosh, they had a lot of good birds there, the Arctic tern and the Lapland longspurs and golden crowned sparrows, and just, oh, so many great birds. Of course, lots of eagles. But I would just pore over my book, go through my book, and page by page by page. And by doing that, I figured out that the hawks and the owls and the shorebirds and the water birds were all in the front of the book, and the songbirds were in the back of the book. And pretty soon I got pretty fast at flipping right to where the birds were. At least I knew front, back, half back, and I just would flip through, and pretty soon I would see a new bird and I would actually know what it was. That would surprise me, that I would know what it was and just go, oh, I did learn something after all. But that's how I taught myself to do it. And so I do have all the different bird guides, and they all have a little bit of different information in them, so it's fun to find out all the little idiosyncrasies of the birds. Of course, the best thing is going out into the field and actually watching the birds, or having feeders out your window, which we're all doing right now for our stay-at-home events that we're doing. I have a great big giant feeder in my backyard that is 6 feet tall. I can stand underneath it, and it's a big platform that's 4 feet by 3 feet with a roof on it, and I hang several feeders in there. I have a heated bird water bath, and then I spread food on the ground as well. So I get many, many birds to my feeder. I have a great yard bird list. I had a lot of great birds come. So the great thing about right now doing this outside, watching all the birds in our yards, that's what we're going to learn about, the birds in our yards, and maybe in your local neighborhood or weed patch, or maybe you have a meadow or a park that you can get to real easily, and it makes for great fun going out and discovering the birds that you have in your own little neck of the woods. So I hope this class has been helpful. The next part is going to be, again, we're going to sit down and we're going to draw. We're going to sketch real fast. We're going to sketch real slow if the bird sticks around. And hopefully you'll get a lot of new info and you'll take the challenge to go out into your yard. So also when we do the next class, it would be great if you could have a sketchbook there, pencils, colored pencils. I usually do my work with colored pencils. And we'll go over some of that in the next part of the class too. So thank you all for coming, and I hope to see you at the next one. Enjoy those birds.